was supposed to give a totally different speech today. But the happenings back home do not allow me to be pretentious and speak of how happy I am to be here in the States. All my friends are consistently getting murdered. And therefore, I'm sorry I'm late, I had to tailor my speech to stand in solidarity with what's happening at home, but also to blend it with the experience I'm having here in America. And I've titled it, I Yearn for Home. How do you say 7 in your language, Arlington? Skombisa. How do you say it in yours, Blessed? Ihe. Kadiatu. Woluvla. Mon professeur. Duromia. Isabella. How do you say 7? Mukungate. And you, my brother Alex? Saba. 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 7, 7. It's the 7th day of the 7th month of this year. It's a rhythm, a resistance, a reminder. It has echoed through several parts of Kenya, across the Rift Valley, through the alleyways of a street in a slum called Mathare, across the tarmac of my favorite street, Tom Mboya Street, and the hallowed Kamkunji grounds, into the bone marrow of a nation that remembers and refuses to forget. For 35 years, this Saba Saba drumbeat has pulsed in my people's bones. Fellow architects of the Africa that we want, I greet you this afternoon. You see, I've always been compared to several leaders. Back home in Kenya, Tom Mboya, Robert Ouko, you name them. But one notable one here in the States has been Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. That one feels especially weighty. And normally I do not have such a thing in my hand. And some of you have been asking me what happened. The reason why I've fixated upon Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is that this wound is poetic in all the wrong ways. Because in 1958, a lady drove a blade through Dr. Martin Luther King's chest, and it was meant to silence him. That blade nearly stole his voice. I won't tell you where I got this one, but it was in Harlem, the very borough where somebody almost silenced Martin Luther King Jr.'s voice, and it is coincidental, but to me it's a bit cheeky. You see, back home I came into the spotlight unintentionally. I was thrust upon it for leading one of the most consequential protest movements in Kenya's history. And it has been a roller coaster. I have been called a hero. I've been called a traitor. I've been carried shoulder high, and I've been spat on. I've been cheered by thousands and booed by thousands. But none of that has stopped me from doing what is right, even though George Saville once warned us that a man who should call everything by its right name would hardly pass the streets without being knocked down as a common enemy. Today, I could not focus in class because back home, the Kenyan youth are marching again. And they're not marching merely for spectacle. They are marching for our survival. The covenant that was forged on the 7th of July, 1990, the promise for multi-party democracy, of accountable leadership, and of inviolable dignity of every Kenyan life, has been bruised by deceit and bled by bullets. In all honesty, I should be with them. My feet itch for the pandemonium of Luthuli Avenue. My eyes long for the tear gas sting of Kimathi Street. My lungs craved the tangled melodies that are always sung by 1,000 throats. Vijana msilale, lale lale, vijana msilale. Bado mapambano, mapambano, mapambano. Bado mapambano. But duty to myself, to the Orange Democratic Movement, and to the country at large places me here, in the land of the free and the home of the brave, here in a former American president's home, to speak not only for them, them who come from Kenya, but for all of us who yearn for a home. See, centuries ago, Thomas Jefferson, a complex, brilliant, and deeply flawed individual, penned the words that we still recite to date, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Very powerful words indeed. But words require muscle. They must be backed by trust. Here in my hand, I hold a US dollar, the currency that all of us dream to be paid in, the currency which you measure statistics of wealth and poverty back home. There are people who live above it and people who live beyond the dollar. But the dollar is not backed by gold. It's not backed by oil or gold or diamonds or any precious jewels that are found in your countries. It is backed by one thing: the full faith and credit of the United States government. A promise that is enshrined in its constitution. I think it's Article 4, Section 1. That says the state will repay its debt based on its ability to tax, borrow, and print money. Faith, trust, and credibility. So as Socrates would have, I ask you today, what backs the soul of our republic? Can Kenyan leaders present their names, their records, and their debts and find themselves trusted by the people? Can the leaders from your country do that? Or has public faith been so devalued that all we hold in our hands now is paper? But I refuse to despair, because I have witnessed in real time the arithmetic of hope. When a mamamboga back home shields a child from a tear gas canister, one becomes two against fear. When a muralist in hiding writes freedom or haki yetu on a cracked wall dilapidated by time, paint becomes prophecy. When a mother in our lowliest slums needs chapati for exhausted protesters and victims of police brutality, hunger surrenders to solidarity. Hope multiplied is a force to tyranny that no tyranny can audit. But I cannot romanticize struggle. This year alone, bloggers have been abducted for speaking the truth. Women have been dragged from borders and violated, raped. Their bodies politic made and turned into literal backgrounds. Young men have been killed in police cells and disappeared in unmarked graves. That is not governance. It is violence disguised as murder and disguised as order, really. And so I find myself in this historical junction, as stark as the one Churchill found himself in 1940, asking, do we surrender to creeping night or do we rise to wage daylight's war? I say we choose daylight. So hear me now. We must build the country that we want. And to do that, I am calling for an intergenerational ceasefire. A literal ceasefire from older generations that shout shoot to kill orders without flinching. And a figurative ceasefire for the youth who, robbed of opportunity, risk their lives in the streets because death now seems no worse than silence. We need a national convention, one that includes all voices, the state, the church, the youth, the workers, the women. Let us sit down together and build this republic again, brick by brick, from the truth, not the bottom up. To the government, I ask, how many young lives must be extinguished for you to keep looting public coffers? How much is enough? The Kenya I dream of is one where we shall defend the soul of this country, not with rifles first, but with righteous speech, lawful assembly, and uncorrupted ballots. Where we will audit every shilling borrowed in our name, because debt without benefit is nothing short of generational theft. Where we shall bind our police to a higher creed, to serve, not to slaughter. That badge must be a shield, not a mark of impunity. No more bullying, no more impunity, no more disrespect from public servants to the public they swore to serve. And as long as government continues to issue open shoot to kill orders and the police execute these orders in broad daylight, Kenya shall know no peace. As a leader in the Orange Democratic Movement's Youth League, I will rally every corner to our republic towards a referendum, a people's path to shape the Kenya that we deserve. Some of you might think it is idealistic, but history is not written by the cynics. It is written by the faithful ones. We're the ones who write the chapters. I yearn for home, and I know that deep in my chest that you do too. where we'll have no negative ethnicity, no prejudice or hostility. I yearn for a Kenya where Sabasaba is not just an anniversary, but a verb. Where in 2055, when people study this moment, they will say, there stood a generation that matched its rhetoric with its repentance, its anger with its architecture, and its longing with its laws. And then, only then, shall it be home. Thank you.